I love planting fields in my world. They take up a lot of space, they look amazing, and they're quick to build. Today, I want to show you how I took fields from looking like these to something like these, with 3 easy steps. The first aspect here is the boundary of the fields. This can either be between 2 different fields or between a field and where it ends, in this case a cliff. There's a few different ways you can do this, but it's really important not to just have the field end abruptly, because that often looks times really bad. Even in this case, I have kind of like a lush sort of cliffside here where it's a lot of ferns and tall grass and stuff. I don't think this looks the best. I would probably do it a little bit differently now. But in between the fields, I'm still pretty happy with these walls I did. This is one I used a lot in the past, oftentimes with grayer tones, with the stones, cobblestones, andesite, that sort of thing. You could also probably use like deep slate and some basalt or something for a darker tone, but any combination really will work. In this case, I went with the brick tones, and I think they worked out pretty well. I used a lot of stairs and slabs and walls and stuff here to change up the shape of it to make it look like it had been worn down over time. So this is the first option I'll use fairly frequently. The next boundary technique I'll use very often, especially in this world, is just a bunch of leaves all over the place. Kind of looks like a thorn bush or something separating out the fields, which is fairly accurate to real life. And in this area specifically, it's a very lush area of my world, so I think having a bunch of leaves really helps tie that in further. It's right next to the enchanted forest and this castle, which is overgrown, but in a nice lush way, not in a deteriorating way. But having leaves like this can help a lot. In this case, I'll usually just go along with a row of leaves on the bottom, and then every now and then I'll bring it up by 1. And then also every now and then I'll bring it out to the side by 1. And I'll do that in towards the field too, maybe like here, or over here, for example, to kind of increase the randomness of it. And then in certain spaces I'll leave a gap open here so that people can actually get in and tend to the fields. The last technique I've used in this world, this is the newest area I built, is kind of a mix of fences and the bushes. It almost looks as though there was once upon a time a fence, and at some point the vines or thorns or bushes, whatever, kind of overtook it, and now you can only see certain sections of the fence peeking out. Another way to look at it is kind of like the fence is just falling apart and then nature sort of taking over. So I did that around this area, and I think it turned out fairly well. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter which way you choose to add a boundary to the field, but adding a boundary, regardless of which type, can really help make it look like it's not just a random patch of wheat, but that it's somebody's job to take care of this, and that they have strict boundaries about where each crop will be, which is really important in tying it all together. And then if you know what sort of style you're going for in that particular area of your world, you can choose the boundary type to kind of match that. So I had the bricks earlier, and that was closer to the city, which makes a little bit more sense to me. This way is a little bit more rural. They probably just went with a fence, or leaves in the other case would be similar for this scenario. The next step is making the fields not flat. I have 2 right here that are flat. They're some of the only ones in my world that are absolutely this flat. I think when you're standing across, looking across this, it just looks pretty boring, versus if the ones in the field are much more visually appealing, especially from down here. In this area, I have a lot of the fields kind of starting to ascend up the mountain, so it was really easy to add elevation in here. So this is kind of the first way I've done that, with, I guess, a gradual slope upwards. You can see almost all the fields in this area have that. Another option, if you want to add elevation but you don't have like a slope you can move up, is to try and make rolling fields instead, which is kind of just increasing the middle of the field either up or down. In this case, it starts a little bit lower and then goes up and then comes back down. This one, sort of similar, up and then down. This one starts up and then only comes down because on the other half of this field, I decided to make it kind of just a little bit of a grassland area, or meadow, I guess. But if this was a full field, this whole area was fields, and this would come down and then back up again. So if you can't have it actually end at a higher point or end at a lower point, then this is a good option to try and add some of that elevation in. So when you're walking around, you still get that visual interest versus just having a flat field like I showed you earlier. Another important point is water management, I'm going to call it, which is basically just hiding the water. I came to this area specifically because I did a really bad job of it here. I didn't even try. It's been a long time since I built these fields. I should probably come back and fix them up. There's a lot of ways people do this. It's pretty common just to use like a hay bale if you have a wheat field to cover up the water. If you do that all over the place, it looks quite a bit better. If you're in a field with potatoes, beetroot, carrots, something a lot more green, it's a little bit harder to get away with a hay bale. You can try and use leaves instead. It'll be kind of similar, or lily pad, carpet works too. Really anything to just kind of cover up the water. Because especially in this format where you just have like a spot of water, a spot of water, a spot of water, and not something contingent, that's not a word, contingent, no, contiguous, there you go. When you just have spots of water, it doesn't look natural at all, and it looks kind of odd. Obviously, when you're down at ground level, it doesn't look too bad because you can't really see them, but even if you're a block or two up, then it kind of becomes immediately apparent that there's holes in the field. So this is a bad job of it. Most of the time nowadays, I won't even add any water to the fields. I'll just leave them as the unfertilized soil. This is another older field I did, but I did it differently, and in my opinion much better, is where I added streams coming all the way down. So I have these aqueducts coming out of the hillside, and then they turn into streams which fertilize the fields completely. This is a more natural way. If you have a stream, you can kind of build a field around it, and that will do well. Obviously, you have to build lots of streams kind of all close to each other because the fertilization distance isn't that far, which is kind of annoying. In this case, it was fine and turned out well, but sometimes that's kind of problematic. This is another option to do that. But as I mentioned, nowadays I don't even bother to fertilize the fields because you don't actually need to. Yes, if you just put down the farmland by itself, fairly quickly it will just turn back to dirt. But providing that you put seeds on it, it will never actually turn into dirt. The seeds will take a very long time to grow, but this is a creative world and all these fields are ornamental. We're never going to harvest them or anything. And if that's your goal, just to have kind of decorative fields, then it doesn't really matter how long it takes to grow as long as it grows eventually. So this is what I've been doing for a while now. This piece of farmland is just proving my point. It should turn to dirt, but it's not. As long as you plant something on it, then it will not turn to dirt. So yeah, I've been using that very frequently for like the last year. And the only difference between this is that the base of the farmland color is kind of this softer gray, versus when it's fertilized it turns dark brown, not gray. Usually this isn't really that important because in the case of wheat or potatoes, whatever, it covers up the farmland fairly well, especially from like this angle. You can't really tell the difference between them. If you had, for instance, this sort of thing where I use torch flowers, these leave a lot of exposed farmland area. In a case like this, you might need to use water and then cover it up in a different way. Because in my opinion, the default farmland color doesn't look as good as the fertilized one. And if you're going to use a crop like this with the torch flowers, then the texture and color of the farmland is a lot more obvious, and you can't really hide it underneath the wheat like you can in these fields or this beetroot field. So just an important side note there. But generally, I don't bother to fertilize my fields. So that's an easy way to cover up the water, is just by not having any in the first place. A little bonus technique here, not really a technique, but just a suggestion to mix up the types of fields. So don't have a bunch of wheat fields all next to each other. You can put in some carrots and beetroots and break it up a little bit. Obviously, there's kind of only 4 types with the carrots, potatoes, beetroot, and wheat. So it can get kind of hard or repetitive. But if you're having one large field, maybe consider splitting into a couple of smaller ones of different types. But I guess it really depends on your world. But I think having different colors fields, I wish it was more than just kind of green or the wheat color, yellow, I guess. But yeah, it'd be great if there's something else, but just not having it just green or just the wheat is nice to mix it up. Another suggestion, if you want to mix it up, is by putting in some custom fields. In this case, I have some corn, and I believe over here I have some red lettuce, I think I came up with originally. Maybe it was red cabbage, I can't remember. In this case, and then recently in another video I kind of built these flower fields over here. May not be crops necessarily, but they're so pretty, so you can use these custom crops instead of the default crops if you want to mix it up even more, which when you have as many fields as I do, because I really like fields, it can be some nice break from the constant wheat and potatoes. So I consider doing that as well. Thank you for watching. I hope this video will help you build better fields in your own worlds. Leave a like if you liked, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye for now.